Joe. And Joe, I met, let's see, about a year ago, I believe, almost around this time, I think. We met at a Pride event in Gainesville, and we just had a brief little interaction there. I was able to talk to you at that point, and I thought, this guy is like great, and he has something that I really just feel you can bring to everyone. So I'm just thankful to have you on here, Joe.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, who you are,
Yeah.
and we'll just jump right in it.
Yeah. So my name is Joe Smith, actually. Yeah, I'm from the Midwest. I'm a Midwestern boy, raised for the most part in Missouri. Grew up in church, a conservative fundamentalist. For anybody like Free Will Baptist, that was the denomination I grew up in. So
Wow.
yeah, so it was a church plant. They called them home churches, but so it was a theologically strict upbringing. Women had their roles. You got to stay in your role. Men ran things. And the denomination was pretty much run by a bunch of old white guys, and that's how it was. And
Yep.
they didn't like anything outside of that. Fortunately for me, while my parents were kind of new Christians at the same time that I was, I've always gone to church. So I guess even before that, I was like a bus kid. I don't know if people remember that.
I do.
Churches used to bring buses in the neighborhood, so I would do that.
Oh
yeah.
My gosh.
So I would do that. And so I've always been drawn to this idea of God. Don't know why, just have. But when my parents started going to church, I was probably like, I don't know, 8. And I don't remember when my mom got saved, to use that, that church language. But my dad and I did at the same time. We got baptized at the same time on the same day when I was 9. So we were all kind of like figuring it out together.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I will say that my parents, looking back, protected me from a lot of the religious trauma that a ton of people had to go through with these like super conservative fundamentalist churches, because while those things were being taught to us theologically, my parents didn't live that out at home. And so, I didn't experience those kinds of things at the house. My parents, they had their own stuff, but that was behind the scenes. They didn't let us see any of it. We didn't know that were having issues until, we were adulthood, and they worked them out, and they figured it out, and they've been happily married for, oh my gosh, 46 years now.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah. And we've got just a phenomenal relationship. I talk to him multiple times a week, text constantly. So I'm very blessed in that. So I didn't have to deal with a lot of the trauma that comes from parents doing those kinds of things.
Yes.
It was just stuff that was being preached from the stage, which was still a lot, I mean, being 9, 10 years old and, weekly being told, and I'm sure you'll resonate with this, but being told that, humanity is lower than worms, and that we're born deserving of hell, and those things. And so like as a 9, 10, 11-year-old forming who they are, that was, not only confusing, but like confusing was a big part of it. Just like, well, I don't understand why I haven't done anything to deserve hell, and so, but I'm sure it's the same with you. It's a mix of good and bad, like there's a ton of crap that comes from the stage, but then all of a sudden you have these people over here that you're in community with, and we had, I had people that loved me and that I loved, and good memories, and then interwoven in that is just this really trash theology, that you carry with you. And it's just that weird mix of like, there's so much good that happened when like this community, these people, and then, this trash theology. And then, as you get older, you
Mm,
start to see like, okay, everything's not as, rosy or whatever. Because there were these things happen, you know what I mean? It's just like
I
this
do.
just tangled, mess that you then, as you get older, you've got to learn to start peeling. And it's just like, yeah. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
so that was kind of like the, church upbringing. Um,
Did you ever find yourself like by 9, 10, 11, 12,
mm,
did you find yourself beginning to question the things that were coming from the stage at that young of an age? Or were you it just was like,
no,
it was?
yeah,
No.
it just was. No, I did. I will tell you the one thing that I did do, is that I learned to, you said this in your episode that's on right now, this week's story, but I learned to wear masks. I had my church mask, and I
Yes.
had my everywhere else mask. And I wore those masks so well that at church I could literally get away with anything. And I'm not going to go into the stories because I got away with some stuff that I'm not going to talk about.
Yep.
But like literally getting caught. But because I wore that mask so well, that there was no way that they were like, oh, well, that's not you. That's not Joe, you know?
Mm,
So,
mm,
um, I did learn to wear masks really well, to my detriment.
yeah.
But no, to answer that question fully, I didn't question it. It didn't make sense a lot of times, but it's the preacher, it's the man of God up on
Right.
stage, and he's
Right.
telling me verbatim from the word of God, right? And so
Right.
apparently I must be deserving of this. One thing that did just scare the Jesus out of me was the rapture theology.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah,
Wait, that was supposed to happen this last weekend. You knew
oh,
that.
I know.
Okay. All
Either it
right.
happened and we're still here, or like,
I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah. Maybe we can get some stuff done if it actually happened. Like we can. Anyway, nope, that was mean. But yeah, the whole rapture stuff, because I can remember a couple of times, even into like my high school years, man. I would come home and nobody was home, and I'd drive home, and they, nobody came home longer than I expected. You know what I mean? Like the time that they should have been there
Yeah.
had come and
Yeah.
passed. And I would legitimately start getting worried. Did I get left behind? And I would go through like this checklist of, did I sin? Did I pray for forgiveness? Like, is there something that I did that, now I got left behind because of it? And a lot of that was because of the stuff that, not only did they teach us from stage, but man, in Sunday school and youth group, this is going to show my age a little bit, but they would show us these movies like Thief in the Night.
Oh
Um,
gosh. Yes.
yeah. Do you remember those from the
Yes,
late
because it had the
70s,
song,
80s?
Don't be left behind.
Yeah.
We've all were
We'll
left
all be
behind.
ready. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So we watched those in youth group. We watched those in Sunday school and stuff. And that's just how it was going to be. Right. So that one was a doozy. Yeah. And the biggest one for me, I will say that probably warped my thinking the most was the the American church's view of hell. And I developed a compulsion
Mm,
that started as a child, with a prayer, that a bedtime prayer. It's the "Now I lay me down to sleep. I
yes.
pray the Lord my soul to keep." And then I added to that. So it was like, bless mommy, daddy, I can still remember it. It's
Yeah.
bless mommy,
Yeah.
daddy, Mike, Coco, Jake, Joy, aunts and
Yes.
uncles, cousins, all my
Yes.
friends, great kiss for Grandma Smith and me. I repeated that prayer every night until I was in my 30s. Yeah. And there were moments like as an adult that, and my teenage years too, that I would lay down to go to sleep, and I would just lay there. And I'm like, why? I'm so tired. Why can't I go to sleep? And then I would remember, oh, I didn't say my prayers. I would say my prayers and then I'd go to sleep, but I couldn't go to sleep until I said them.
So you said them.
Yeah. Because I was literally, as a child into my high school years, just that fear of hell. If I don't say my prayers and I do die in my sleep, I'm going to go to hell because there'll be unforgiven sin in my life. It
Oh,
sounds ridiculous now, right?
yeah, I hear
But,
you.
as a kid growing up, and it took me a long time to kind of get out of that. But again, even as much as that sucks, again, I grew up in just this really loving, supportive
Sure.
home. And I, my dad and I butted heads when I got a little bit older, but I always knew that they had my back. I
Yes.
ran track and I was in band, and I could
Mhm.
look up in the stands, and if both my parents weren't there, one of them was, one of them might have to be at
Mhm.
work, but one of them was in the stands.
Mhm.
And so I was very blessed that even the stuff that was coming at me from the stage was, just junk, that at home, it was a safe space. And, I received a lot of love and support. So very blessed.
Yeah, and that's very fortunate. It's very fortunate.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really is, because I mean, I know some people that, grew up Baptist, and they had an opposite experience at home. What was coming from the pulpit was going on at home as well. I mean, it was
Yep.
like the family was trying to convert each other, and they were like evangelizing each other at home, and it had some really damaging qualities to it. So then my question to you is, if you had this loving home, you questioned some things obviously about the rapture, and you questioned some things about hell, and there were, as you started to get older, what caused you, because I've heard you say this before about a deconstruction journey, like what would
Mhm.
cause you to do that? Because even though stuff can come from the pulpit that's outrageous, you still went on this deconstructing journey though, with your faith and where you're at. And I'm just wondering how that
Yeah.
evolved. What came from that?
Well, I think part of it was, I went to Bible college.
Hmm.
Um, I met my wife there. We got married later, but I met her there. We started, our first ministry was in a small church. It's not small anymore, but it was a very dysfunctional church up in northern Missouri. Um, they're rocking and rolling now. We disagree theologically, but they love people so well.
Hmm.
Um, and I know the staff, and they're just like top-notch people. Um, but we were there, and it was just so, we were in our early 20s, and it was such a horrible experience. I did student ministry. Then my youth group was amazing, and those kids are now, adults with their own kids, and
Yeah.
we're still in touch with a
Yeah.
ton of them, and have great relationships. But behind the scenes it was just really bad. And then we moved to a church, a really fast growing church in Winsville, which is the town that I grew up in. It's right outside St. Louis, Missouri, like 45 minutes or so. And now it's just one big urban sprawl. So I guess it could be considered a suburb of St. Louis now. But when we were at that church, it was great in the fact that I got to be close to my family, my brother and his family, and my parents, and my wife's family was really close by too. So those years together were really sweet. But the leadership of that church was, oh man, I don't want to oversell it or like be too dramatic, but it was one of the for me personally, it was one of the worst leaderships I ever worked with. It was very business oriented and
Hmm.
very business minded.
Yes.
Um, Money drove the machine.
Yes.
And that's exactly what it was. It was just a big machine. And um, there were lots of things, nothing illegal, right? I don't want to
Sure.
say that.
Sure.
Nothing
Right.
illegal happened that I was aware of. Um, there were some things that I felt like were kind of borderline ethical as far as decisions were being made,
Mhm.
where stuff was going to go. But I think for me, the deconstruction journey started with that church and that leadership, because I started questioning, this can't be what Jesus was talking about
Mm,
in these gospels, right? Like if what's recorded, is anything remotely close to what the historical Jesus would have said, then what we're doing just can't, it doesn't fit. Like, it just can't be. And so that really drove me to like start reading. And
mm.
I felt like I can't read the same things that I've always read, because they're going to
Right.
tell me the same things they've always said, right? So
Correct.
I had to branch out. I had to go find some people that I disagreed with. And
I'm with
yeah,
you.
and the first author that I found that led me on my path was Rob Bell.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah, he
Yes.
is just this
Yes.
master storyteller, right?
Yes.
It is an art form with that man. And his book, Velvet Elvis, and Jesus Wants to Save Christians, and and Blue Like Jazz. I don't want to leave that out. Don Miller
No.
too, Blue Like Jazz,
Yep.
and that subsequent story, those three books, Through the Painted Desert, Blue Like Jazz, and I can't remember what the last one is now. But Donald Miller and Rob Bell were the first books that I read that were outside that like evangelical bubble that
Yes.
I was in.
Mhm.
And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. I need to read more. So I got then that led to like Shane Claiborne, and then
Mhm.
like these bloggers that were out. This was like early or late zeros, I guess is how you say it, into
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah, like 2009, 2010,
Yep.
2011,
Yep.
right in there. And then there were these bloggers that were starting to come out, like Rachel Held Evans, and
Oh my
uh,
gosh.
and I just lost her name, Hademeyer, Jen Hademeyer, is that her name?
Oh, that's a new one for me.
Hademaker,
No, I'm not
Jen
familiar.
Hademaker. Yeah, she was
No,
right there with Rachel Held Evans, um, unless I'm really mispronouncing that name. But anyway,
I doubt you are. It's okay.
yeah. But so they were reading that stuff and just kind of like seeing that there were different perspectives. And I think for me, the first domino to fall was women's role in the church. And it was literally because my daughter was born in 2002.
Wow.
And as she got older, and I began to see just how talented and vivacious and all these
Mm,
things.
mm.
She's just such a beautiful human being. I began to realize that the things that we're teaching was saying that God can't speak through her because her plumbing is different than mine. I happen to pee standing up, but because she pees sitting down, God can't speak through her. And I'm
Right.
like, wait, whoa. And I'm ashamed to say that I had never made that connection before, but
Yes.
when my daughter came along, I was like, that can't be right. So I dug into that, and that fell apart quick. I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah.
just pull that thread a little bit and they're all unraveled. And so then that was probably like 2012, 2011, 2012.
Hmm.
And that's the beginning of that deconstruction process that probably took, a good 10 years. But
Yeah.
that was the beginning of it.
Mm, It's amazing. You're talking about the Rob Bell book. The one that did it for me was when he was talking about the sacred cows. He was
Mm-hmm.
using, and I had never heard that terminology before, except in, the book of, Genesis and Exodus with the cow, but I had never had
Yeah.
him just, he spoke in such a way to my heart that made me think to myself, oh my gosh, I have all these sacred cows. See, that's part of that deconstructive journey. Is it's not just realizing what is wrong, maybe, or something in a way that maybe we're like, no, it's what we then did with it too. And then I was like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
I have all these sacred cows. I got to get rid of all these sacred cows. It's like, oh my God.
Uh-huh.
And realizing that I had put the Bible in places it shouldn't have been, and had put my doctrines, my theologies, the gifts of the Spirit, whatever it was, in these categories of superiority that made me here and everybody here. And realizing I was really worshiping me in a lot of ways. And
Yeah. My thoughts, my opinion, my
oh
theology.
oh
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's
Yep.
all about me. It's all about you, Lord song. I always sing it, it was
Yeah.
like, it was all about me.
Yeah.
And it's recognizing that, seeing like,
Yeah.
wow, like I took on those things. I agreed with those things. I bought those things on. So then what began to continue to progress? Because you've progressed
I
far.
have. Yes, I
You're
have.
down the track here.
Yeah, it just kept going. Once I realized that this thing that had been taught to me is like rock solid, like spoken from the mouth of the divine and printed on paper and handed to me. Once I realized, like, wait a second, that's not quite accurate. Then it just opened up this whole world of like, okay, well, what else? What else? And so it was like, women's role in the church and inerrancy and um inerrancy was, I will say, was really easy in some aspects and really difficult in others.
How
Uh,
so?
sorry, go ahead.
How so?
Oh, how so? Well, for anybody that's listening, inerrancy, the idea that, the Bible is the literal word of God and speaks 100% perfectly to everything it speaks to. I honestly thought that that's how it had always been seen. Because if you look at like early church writings, I'm talking like post New Testament, there are statements that like early church fathers will make that talks about their high regard of the New Testament letters that became canon. And if you take them and you read them through the lens of like I had of this is the inerrant word of God, it sounds like they're agreeing. But they didn't have that same view. They didn't have that same lens that I had been handed. So they're saying, things completely different.
Yes.
Once I realized that, it began to answer a lot of problems that I had with scripture, specifically the violence of the Old Testament, inaccuracies in the New Testament, contradictions, which, I had always been told it never contradicts itself. And then you have to gin up all of these things to make it not. But once I realized that Moses didn't write, the Torah, he didn't write those.
Yes.
All of these things had been handed down and maybe written down too, but hadn't been edited and collected and put together until like, post-exilic and all of these things. And a lot of these things are, and I'm going to use the word myths, and not that they're not true, right? But that they're myth because they're origin stories. So it's Israel looking back and being like, okay, well, Adam and Eve aren't literal historical people. This is a story that tells us about, an infant humanity, right? Infant humans and snatching power, snatching wisdom before they're ready for it and not trusting God. It's the story of Israel, the ancient story of Israel, so once I saw those things and they're looking back and they're like, well, our people did these things and they're attributing it to God. It's a very human story. That dealt with a lot of problems for me. The issues that it then created within me was like, well, then how do I trust any of this?
Right.
How do I trust any of it? And it took me a long time. And I mean, my people, I'm still a pastor.
Yeah.
But I wasn't quiet about any of this. We walked through this together, and I'm very fortunate that I have a community of people that were like, yeah, let's do this. So I think that it took a while, only because the framework that I was handed was so ingrained in me, because growing up in it, being educated in it, teaching in it for so long, that they were all it was just like these webs, and you got to just pick them one at a time and deal with them. And there were real moments where, I mean, my wife, there were moments where I said, I don't believe any of this anymore. I just don't believe any of it. And there were times where I still found, I always found beauty in Jesus and his teachings. And so I was just like, I don't believe that there's a God anymore, but I believe this is still really good. And then there were moments where I was like, no, I'm still a Christian. I think there's a God, and I still find you, and it's all over. I was all over the map.
Yes.
I think kind of where I'm at now, not to skip ahead, but I would describe myself more as Christian agnostic. That I still believe in the teachings and beauty of Jesus and his life, and his death and resurrection. And even then, there's still room for interpretation. I still leave room for that, what that means. But the agnosticism comes into the part of like, I just don't know about a lot of the rest, and I'm not gonna spend my life trying to create another fundamentalism on the other side of that. And so really embracing the mystery and just realizing I'm not going to know all the answers, and that's okay. It's unknowable, right?
Yes.
So that's that for Nancy. That one took a long time for me. That one was hard. It was emotionally hard. Not so much intellectually, but just emotionally hard. Like I knew what I was reading, like I could put two and two together here, but man, 2 and 2 did not equal 4 here. And that took a long time. That was hard. That was very hard. I mean, just existential crisis.
I just want to honor you because I actually want to talk about this crisis, because this does happen, especially when you have a heart after God. You're loving God, you're serving God, you want to honor God and the ways there, and you want to be sure that what you're bringing to other people is honoring, and all of that. And then comes that emotional crisis you're talking about, and I just want to say, as a man, for you, I don't always hear men always say that, boy, it was really rough and it was really hard and I had to really but I'd like you to just shed a little light on that, like what were some of the processes, because that's a shift.
Yeah, it really was. I can tell you that, like, I don't remember what I was listening to. So one of the things that served me well until it didn't is I'm just a reader. I read everything I can get my hands on. And with the invention of Audible, it just made it so much more accessible. So I was either reading or listening to something. And the reason I was doing that is because I was trying to find better answers, right? Like these answers no longer made sense. So I've got to find the right answers.
Oh, yes.
Which served me well until it didn't, because like I said, there are some questions that are just unanswerable. And I was kind of running into some of those questions, but I don't remember what I was listening to. And I've told my people this, I don't remember what it was I was listening to. I was walking our dog. We've got a walking trail at the end of our neighborhood, and it was, a fall day, and it was gorgeous. And I was walking the dog, and I don't remember what was said, but I remember how I felt, because internally it felt like the world had just opened up. And I don't mean that in a good way, like open up to swallow me. Like everything just fell apart. The whole house of cards, the Jenga blocks, I pulled the wrong one. And I literally stopped and put my hand on a tree because the tree was solid, and I needed to touch something solid, because internally I just felt like there was nothing solid. And there was a real mourning period.
Yes.
Like a sadness of realizing that the things that I had like really wrapped my entire life around, I felt like I'd wasted my life at that moment. Like, did I just waste 20 plus years of not only like I've been a pastor for over 20 years now. So like was 20 years wasted, and then college wasted. It's just like, did I just spend my life doing something that literally doesn't make, it's not there. There's nothing there, So there was a real like sadness, a real mourning period of recognizing that the thing that I thought it was is not true. That mourning period took a long time for me. And it may not be the same for others. And it was like, it was literally like those stages of grief, right? And it was like,
Yes.
but it was bouncing back and forth at different times, because like you don't deconstruct everything at once, right? So you
No.
deconstruct this and then this and then this, and it's like you just repeat these mourning things. I will tell you that there's a fantastic book that, if anybody's listening, it's written by Brian McLaren, and I believe it's called The 4 Stages of Faith. I think that's the title of the book. And he just over his time, he's been doing this deconstruction stuff for, decades before we had the language for it. And just his time, he just broad strokes it. He doesn't use it to like box people in. He's just, hey, this is what I've seen, and you can kind of see where you are to help gauge, it's simplicity, complexity, perplexity, and then oh shoot, I just lost the last one. And the last one is like where you want to be. I can't think of it. I'm sorry. But perplexity is the stage where most people find themselves in when it comes to deconstruction. And you basically, like the characteristics of that stage comes with a lot of nihilism, and life is worthless. It's meaningless.
Yes.
None of this matters. And it felt like that a lot. And one of the things that I have found problematic in this deconstruction movement, especially when it comes to like social media and stuff, is that a lot of people end up just staying there, and instead of moving on to that next stage, which is, man, I really want to find that. It's going to drive me nuts.
Wish I knew.
Yeah.
I've only read one of his books.
While I'm talking, I'm going to look it up.
Go ahead. No, you're good. You're good.
But a lot of people end up staying in that stage, and the problem with that is that stage is just unhealthy. Is just as unhealthy as fundamentalism was.
Absolutely.
So once I read that was a super helpful book for recognizing, okay, I'm not the only one that has felt this way. That this is part of a natural progression of growth, and not, apostasy or whatever you want to call it. And I think once I felt seen, I guess is a good way to put it. Like once I felt like, okay, somebody sees me in this, and it's okay. Like other people are doing this too. Like this is part of that growth out of just this, really basement level theology. But that was a few years.
I get it.
Yeah, that was a few years. And so it took a toll. It took a toll on me emotionally. And my wife could tell you that she very much saw that, and could see that internally in me. Again, I was still able to teach through that. And I think it was because the vast majority of our people were also in that same stage. We kind of walked through a lot of this together.
Yep.
And so it made sense to people of the things that we were talking about. And if you go back and look at the teachings during that time period, it was a lot of dismantling.
Absolutely. Get it.
The things that we talked about were dismantling all of these things that we had been brought up to believe. And instead of, okay, well, what else? It was all dismantling. And again, it served its purpose until it didn't. Right. But there was a lot of mourning. There was a lot of sadness, a lot of tears.
Yes.
Anger. Yeah, literally those stages of grief.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting as I'm sitting here listening, and I'm, just wanting you to know that, you're being really candid and honest, and I'm appreciating that, because I think we don't hear a lot of that. We don't hear that struggle that, and people sometimes, I can say in my own journey of deconstruction that where I found places was online in these deconstruction community groups. I didn't have the people to rub shoulders with, like you're talking about. And I just really want to just honor, I want to stop here for a second and just honor how you have set in motion your community, your fellowship, to be one where people are honestly looking at things and loving each other through it, loving each other despite where you are on what fence or not on the fence, or, you've learned to do that. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So go ahead. I think you're going to share. Did you find it? Did you?
I did.
Okay,
I did. I was
ahead.
looking at, where did it go? Oh, it's Faith After Doubt is the name of the book. Faith After Doubt.
Yep.
And it's simplicity, complexity, perplexity, and harmony. Harmony is that last stage.
Harmony.
Yeah. And regardless of where somebody lands on Christianity, whether they rebuild a healthier version of it, or they deconstruct and then deconvert into something else, or nothing else at all, that book is incredibly helpful and doesn't presuppose or push you into anything. It's just, this is what we see. Where are you at? Here's the good in this. Here's the bad in this. Here's the things that you can do. And here's the things that you should watch out for. It's very helpful. But harmony is that last one.
Yeah. So and I'll put that in the notes.
Yeah. It's a great book. And I recommend anything that man writes. So Faith After Doubt.
Well, he was really helpful to me with progressive Christianity. I didn't even know there was such a thing. I was steeped in missions, doing my thing, the evangelical fundamental missions. And then I was handed that book, and I was handed the book in England. That's where I first read it. It was like, I was at an Anglican retreat center, and the lady handed me a book. She said, I think you might want to read this. And it was just progressive Christianity. I had no idea what this book was. And I could devour that thing in a matter of moments.
Yeah.
It was like water in a desert.
Oh yeah.
Like, I felt there's, I know there's so many ways we can take this, but there is just something to be said about people who have walked that journey, who are actually okay with uncertainty. Because see, that was the thing for me, was as a Christian, you had to be certain. You were certain of everything. And my whole world flipped upside down, and now I am uncertain.
Yeah.
And it's
scary.
Yeah, it is, because you have all these messages, right? About, if you don't really know, then
Yeah, you can be certain in your salvation. You can be certain in these things. And I found that for me, the biggest part of it was that faith was about right belief. You got to know the right facts. You got to affirm these right facts. But then once, honestly, this was one of the easier parts for me, was like, once I realized that all throughout church history, if you read any church history, what the modern American church teaches and what the first century church taught, first, second, third, fourth, fifth century church, is radically different. There are things that aren't even close. And like, okay, well, if it's based on fact, then somebody's really screwed. Either they're really screwed, or we're all really screwed. When theologies all of a sudden start springing up, and how it changed when the Holy Roman Empire came into being, and then you got the reformers and medieval theology, and just the horribleness that they came up with. And it's just like, and then they had competing thoughts. You've got these guys that I'm reading about now, like Pelagius and Origen and Athanasius and Augustine, and how they all clashed. And it's like, we have this rich history of arguing and debating and seeing things differently. And the modern church is just like, nope, it's this one narrow view, and that's it. Anything outside of this, and you're all burning in hell for eternity.
Yeah. See that now, that brings me to this now, the whole thing of American Christianity, because I feel like it has its own brand in a lot of ways. The Christian nationalism,
oh my gosh.
And I always tell people, if you ever just read The Handmaid's Tale, I feel like, we could be coming like Gilead if we're not, if you're not careful, America. Of course, I'm in the UK though, so I'm already like, I'm branded as something else. But talk a little bit about American Christianity and what you're seeing with this Christian nationalism.
Yeah. So I'm in Florida. I'm in Gainesville, Florida, and Florida is a testing ground. They won't tell you this, but it is a testing ground for authoritarian government in the United States. So our governor, under the guise of Moms for Liberty and this right-wing Christian nationalist faith movement, is targeting, queer kids and families, targeting families of color, Black families, immigrant families, brown families, all under this like umbrella of anti-woke, right?
Yeah.
And so it's embraced by the evangelical church. Maybe not all of it, but some of it. All of them, all of those evangelical churches will embrace some of it. The problem is that these purity tests are just going to get harder and harder, and that circle of like, okay, you're in, is just going to start shrinking. That's how it always works. It happens over history, and then more and more people are on that outside group. But I think that what the rise of Donald Trump did is it didn't bring anything new that wasn't already there. I think what it did is it put a spotlight on it. It gave people permission to just full on embrace the bigotry that Christian nationalism produces. There's a couple of books that I'll recommend if somebody really wants to dive into it. Jesus and John Wayne is one by Kristen Dumas, and then Brad Onishi, who is the host of Straight White American Jesus podcast. I highly recommend. He's got a book that just came out recently called Preparing for War. It's the extremist history of American Christian nationalism. And what we're seeing now is the culmination of decades long planning and work and money behind the scenes. And so every time they talk about grooming, or they talk about taking over, or they start talking about those kinds of things, every accusation is an admission by Christian nationalists, because it's the things that they're doing and have been doing for decades. So like, for instance, one of the things that I'm really involved with here in Florida is our local Pride Community Center, which does a ton of work here in Alachua County. I'm also on a committee that works with our school board, doesn't work with the school board, holds our school board's feet to the fire, but works with the administration, called the Inclusive Schools Committee. And then I'm part of a parent team that's behind the scenes of Equality Florida's Parenting with Pride. And there are these laws that target queer kids and their families for the exact same reasons that the Florida government targeted Black families during desegregation. It's the same wording. It's the same phrases. It's just a different target. And even some of the same targets, because, you can't tell the story of Rosa Parks fully, because that might make white kids feel bad. And that's a really simplified version, but that's what it boils down to. This is basically how Brad Onishi, I was able to interview him for my podcast. That episode hasn't come out yet. It's coming out in a couple of weeks. But one of the things that he talked about is how it's this national body dysphoria. And I think it was actually his partner on the podcast, Dan Miller, that actually came up with this. So I don't want to miscredit it with this theory, but it's this national body dysphoria. And if you look at America, Christian nationalists see America like Captain America. So this body is a white, straight, cisgender, male Christian body, right? Like literally Captain America. And anything that's outside of that view then creates this body dysphoria, because that's not right. That's not what the body looks like. That's not what it's supposed to be. So brown bodies aren't that, right? Black bodies aren't that. Female bodies, gender queer bodies, trans bodies. Those identities, those things do not fit into this narrow category. And so anything that is not that thing is seen as an infection, and then has to be eradicated.
Right.
So he told me, he's like, think about it like when you're sick. Do you take medicine to attack the infection because you're trying to protect the whole body, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not seen as violence. You're not hurting something because you're protecting your body, right? And he said it's seen as the same way. So he said, that's why you see violent acts against queer people. That's why you're seeing violent acts against black and brown bodies, and black trans women, all of these categories where people are, saying the worst things or creating laws and legislating things that are just, they're going to kill people. It's fine because we're protecting the body. And so that's how it's excused. So that's kind of what's happening here.
Yeah, you're right in it.
Yeah, that's what's going on here. I will tell you that there's a lot of pushback. We're seeing the courts throwing some of these laws out. Texas, there was a federal judge in Texas that literally just, I think yesterday, decided that the law against banning drag shows was unconstitutional. So there are things that are happening that's pushing back, but there is a real, I hate to use this rhetoric, I really do, but there's a fight, it's a war between two radically different worldviews or ideologies, if you want to put it that way. One is saying this, you have to fit into this. And I think the other one, if you want to go that binary, one versus the other, and it's really not, but for the sake of this, I think it's more along the lines of like, okay, well, it's either this on that Christian nationalist view. And I think the other side of that is, well, how do we create a society that's beneficial to everybody?
Right.
The problem with that, and I've said this before, for these people in this Christian nationalist view, is that they will scream things like, it's about religious freedom. And if you make these laws over here, you're infringing on my religious freedom. The problem is that it's not actually religious freedom that they're talking about. And I believe 100% that probably the vast majority of them don't even realize what I'm getting ready to say. It's not religious freedom that they're fighting for or worried about. It's religious supremacy. And so when a Christian coach can violate the Constitution and pray on the field with his players, and that's fine, but a Muslim coach can't do the same thing, right? It's religious supremacy. Or when a different worldview is given the same status, the same amount of influence as this Christian nationalist, it's not, they're going to start screaming that we're being persecuted. We're being persecuted. No, you're not. You just don't have as big a piece of the pie anymore, right? Like you're not controlling the table and who sits in the chairs like you used to, because now everybody's getting, the playing field's being leveled. It's not persecution of religious freedom. It is, I think it is like I said, leveling of the playing field, but I think it's also this idea of religious supremacy being held accountable finally. And that's where a lot of that vitriol is coming in, because evangelical Christians, man, they love their persecution kink. So
yes. And there's like this, I hear a lot of cries, like, they're victims and all of these things. And I think to myself, have you seen the laws and the way that they were for like decades? You had the top position for everything. This is not a victim thing. This is not. And I know we're getting close to the time here to end, but I do want to just briefly, if you want to, or you can talk as long as you want, actually. But what caused you to really stand in the gap for the marginalized. Is that something that you always had, or what has brought that?
I did grow up seeing that.
Okay.
My parents, my dad spearheaded when his denomination told him that he couldn't. We have a superpower in my family, in our DNA, and we're buttheads. We are like, I mean, we're just like
That's okay.
otherworldly buttheads. Like I just, there's no other way to explain it. If you're going to tell me I can't do something, you damn well better get out of my way, because I'm getting ready to do it. And I inherited that, from a long line of buttheads. And, but my dad and my mom, they started a medical mission in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and it centers on education, and nutrition and feeding programs for the villages that they're in. So every village that they're in has a school that educates the kids up to 8th grade. And then everybody in the village, not just the kids attending, but everybody gets, like, I'm pretty sure two hot meals a day.
Okay.
Because that's what they can do. I'm pretty sure that that's right. And then there's a supplement, and then they have clinics. So the school is a school. It's also a clinic. And then the same building is a church on Sundays. But you're not required. It's not like a required, whatever. You better be saved or you can't have any of this. That's not how it works.
Right.
And I will say this too, that it's Haitian run. So all of the teachers are Haitian. All of the principals are Haitian. Because my parents are getting older now and they're stateside, everything still runs. It's run by Haitians. So that was really important, that it wasn't like piping in American people to do this thing, right? It's like, nope, we're gonna train, we're gonna school. Yep, we're gonna raise up these people. And so it's all run by Haitians, which was really important. But I saw that growing up. I saw my dad quit a high paying health, hospital job to do this. And that really like made an indelible mark on a young Joe, that this is what you do. This is what it means to follow Jesus. This is what it means to live a good life. And there are tens of thousands of people that have a better life because of what my parents did. And there's just, for me, that, like, I mean, they're such great parents anyway, but that makes me so proud to say, that, ooh, that came out of nowhere. Sorry, I got choked up.
Okay.
So I grew up with that. I grew up seeing that. And then, kind of talking about this whole deconstruction journey, the last piece of the puzzle for me, and it was the one that I didn't want to touch, was queer inclusion in the church. I can say this now, and I don't say it flippantly. I have apologized to so many people, so many of my students in the past. I've reached out to all of them, and then other people that have been part of my churches that I was at. But I didn't want to touch that one because it was too big. It was too much. It was a bridge too far. I knew what it meant, right? Like what we could lose. And that was coming from a real place of privilege. And I know that now. But when I got serious about it, and I can't attribute this, because I've had people accuse me of like taking the easy way out, and you just did this because it's easier to blah, blah, blah. And I have words for those people, because I'm not going to say it here, but it was, and I'm not comparing this. I say this all the time too. What we went through is in no way close to what my queer friends and family have had to go through and continue to go through, right? It's not the same, and I'm not comparing it. But I will say it still was hard. We still almost lost. We lost a lot of people. We lost a lot of friendships, a lot of relationships. Almost closed the doors of the church. That was a really difficult year, working multiple jobs to keep the doors open and stuff, but it was totally worth it. But go back to that deconstruction stuff. when it really started, I can't attribute to anything other than God moving me to do it, because I didn't want to do it.
Right.
And there was like really no specific reason to do so. It was just like, okay, well, all of these other things have just fallen apart. And this has been such a bedrock. I mean, like a hardcore last hill we're all going to die on kind of thing, in the evangelical church. So it's like, okay, I need to honestly know why we teach this. And so I did what I do. I just started diving in and reading. I knew all of the theology on the non-affirming side. I was taught in it, grew up in it, taught it myself. Have a few credits in a couple of those non-affirming books, as part of like, behind the scenes teams that helped with some of that stuff. So I knew that theology very well. So I was like, okay, I got to read people that I don't agree with. And I had somebody here locally hand me Colby Martin's book Unclobbered. That was a good entry level book for me.
Yeah.
I had heard many of those arguments before. He had only made a few things that like, that's interesting. I never heard it put that way before. So it wasn't overwhelming, right? That was a really good, like, I'm in the shallow end of the pool. Not that the book is shallow, but it was just, for me, it was an easy entry into it. And that led to like Kathy Baldock, which led to like Dr. David Gushie's book, which for me sealed the key, or sealed it, was his book, Changing Our Minds. What happened is that theologically, I realized that the non-affirming theology that I had grown up with was on really shaky ground. It was very vague. It was very thin. And it was actually scripture that led me to where I am now, because I did not have an agenda. I really just wanted, what do I believe in? Why do I believe it? That's what drove me to it. And when we as a faith community, and we're called Shift, when we decided to make that shift, we didn't quite know what that meant yet. We just knew that we couldn't be what we were. And so in February of, it hasn't been very long, honestly, February of 22.
Yep.
Yeah, February of 22. It was the last Sunday, we were doing a series called Taboo. And 4 weeks, we talked about topics that the church just doesn't like to talk about. And we hit it head on. And that was, the last topic was human sexuality. And I worked on that sermon for 4 months. And I had never taught a sermon this hard. I worked on it anywhere between 4 and 6 months. And I taught for an hour because we wanted to do it justice. And, you kind of grow into it. I don't know, your experience of this, but, from a point of view of an ally, was very uncertain what that meant, or how to do it. So we started off very slow and very behind the scenes. I felt like that we hadn't earned the right to say anything about anything. So I reached out to the local Pride Center, and the president, her name is Tamara Perry Lunardo, who is a very good friend. She answered my call, and we talked, and we actually hung out the other night. She told me that she was so nervous about this phone call because she was hopeful, but also wanting to protect herself, because churches are sneaky. They suck sometimes. And they have really vague wording that doesn't mean what it means. And so I just said, this is who we are. This is what we're doing. And this is what we did. And I just want to make myself available to you and us available to you to do any behind the scenes things that you need. So set up, tear down, cleaning, food, providing things like that we want to do that for you. And she said, okay. And so that started just like this little relationship. And so they invited me to do a couple little things behind the scenes. And that's what we did. Where we met was the We Say Gainesville rally. Gainesville was spelled Gay.
Yep.
And it was in response to the Don't Say Gay laws, the original one that was getting ready to be implemented. And it was an amazing turnout. And we got invited to be part of that. And I got invited to speak, which I did not feel qualified to do. Like I was just, I initially turned it down because I'm like, I don't have anything to say. And then she was like, no, we need somebody from your perspective up there.
Mhm.
And so when we showed up, we didn't bring, I don't even know if we wore our shift shirts. We may have, but we didn't bring our tent. We didn't bring any like stuff to hand out. We weren't there to invite anybody. We were just there to be in that space because we were allowed to be in that space. And so I honestly did the only, really, God's honest truth, the only thing I felt like I had the right to do, and that was apologize. And I yeah, I was humbled and honored to do that, right? Because not everybody gets to do that. And so, you know, I said what I said, and it was, you know, I still mean every single word of it. But from, you know, I think for us, for me personally, that was kind of a turning point. Because I think it gave me the opportunity to, number one, just publicly, you know, ask for forgiveness. And none of those people knew me. I didn't do anything to any one of those people, but there were people in my past, you know, that got to see it. And, you know, I've been told that, you know, Tamara mentioned it to me that that's the apology that she needed from her pastor that she'll never get, you know? And so it was very humbling to be able to be there to do that. But when I saw, how do I put this? The worst, I've said it a million times, the worst that we were ever met with was cautious optimism. And even people that aren't Christian, people that don't believe in God, they don't like organized religion, they still met us with cautious optimism. That an evangelical church could change its mind and then advocate for them, right? And so over the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, that role has really grown. And as we have found our footing and found our voice and how to use our privilege in an appropriate way, we've gotten louder and more involved, you know, me personally, but also the church as well, while still leaving space. I want to make this, I think this is really important, leaving space for people to come and question and not feel judged regardless of where they are. Because if I hadn't had a space to question and to ask when I was still non-affirming, I would have never ended up here. And so we want to be that space for people now, where if people show up and they don't know what they believe yet, that's totally fine. They can ask all the wrong questions and say it the wrong way. You know what I mean? Because if I didn't have that space, so we do that for people now. And we have people that are part of the church that aren't totally affirming. It's just not for them. It's just like, I don't even know how to put that, but there's almost like this agree to disagree. You just, the line that we draw for us as a faith community is that the moment you dehumanize somebody, then that's unacceptable, and we're not going to tolerate that. But everybody knows who we are. So for the most, you know, for most people, you're not going to have like a firm, non-affirming person show up and exist with us for very long, unless they're willing to ask questions, you know, and go on a journey. But we provide that space. But for us, I think the driving thing is that we felt like, and this is my personality too, so I think that's why it was so important, is that I couldn't just stand on a stage and say things.
Thank you.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, thank you.
I couldn't just stand there and say something. There had to be some action to back it up. And so it was like, we have to. They said, come on, so let's go. We've got to go over there and we've got to do the things that we can do. And so for us, it was very important to show up in those places. And we've been able to do some really cool stuff. We got to help plan and start the Pride student meetups for our.
That's so good.
It is, and 2 hours
Yes.
every month for 2 hours. We have a group of students that show up, and they're just kids. This past meeting, we literally played. We played Would You Rather for like 20 minutes, and then they had this game called the alphabet game, and the person leading it yells out a letter, and then you have to like charade something that starts with that letter. And if two people have the same thing, they're out. We played that for like 30 minutes. And then we had pizza and we had music, and that's literally all it was. But it's 2 hours where these kids get together, and they don't have to worry about anything.
Yes.
That there's nobody's going to say anything to them. They get to be who they are and be completely free for 2 hours. And to me, that's like heaven on earth. To me, that's church.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and that to me, that is sacred space. And we get to do that stuff. And if people show up and they come be a part of Shift, great. They're not going to get an invite from me, because that's not why we do it. And and if they want to come and join and they want to pursue spirituality, what it means to actually follow this teachings of this guy named Jesus, great. But if you never show up, that's not going to change anything we do. I've got lots of friends that are part of Pride now, and they will never come to Shift because of stuff in the past, or it's just a church building alone is enough to trigger somebody.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine, because that's not why we're here. We're here to actually we think that we're participating in bringing heaven to earth, whatever that means for somebody. Flourishing, we think that means flourishing for everybody. Because if I'm supposed to love you like I love myself, I want my life to flourish. I need to want the same thing for you, and how that means flourishing for you. So if who you love looks differently than me, that's fine, as long as you're flourishing, right? So I think that maybe that was a long meandering road to get to the answer to the question. But for us, I think that's why, I don't know, man. If you want to get real churchy, faith without works is dead, right? So, I don't know. We just, yeah.
I know you're there's a humility to you, but I want you to give me a second here just to say something to you, and just what I witnessed with you at the Gainesville rally that we were at when I met you. And I still say, hands down, I've met many different people who say that they're affirming. I've met many people do different things, but I will be really honest. The level of compassion that flows out of you, and the ability to be vulnerable with those who are vulnerable, the ability to love those who, have not had that in their lives, the ability to embrace and to bring in, was so all over you and the people that were there with you in your group. And I went away from there, and I was telling someone, when I was in Florida, about you specifically, because there was just a light, and I don't know how to describe it, and I'm not going to get all weird on this, but there was definitely a light that was inviting everyone into that space, inviting everyone into your space, into your world. You were very approachable. I've seen other churches and other groups show up at Pride events before, and you're just kind of like, why the hell are you there? Because you can tell you don't want to be, and you're like, whatever. And even if you were uncomfortable or whatever it may be, it doesn't matter. It did not come off that way. What came off was an inviting, welcoming spirit. And I look forward to, I will be coming home into Florida for 3 months to fulfill UK immigration laws. And I plan on taking a trip to Gainesville and taking a trip to where you guys are, just because for a variety of reasons. One, because I know that I'm invited inside your heart, whether you say anything or not, whether your church environment, the whole thing, there's an invitation, there's a welcoming. And I just know that it's a place of healing. I know it's a place of healing for those who have been on the outside. So I just want to say that I honor you. I commend what it is that you're doing. You are definitely in the dumpster fire here moment, and you are, pushing it through, and you're doing it. But I want to say that you're doing it. That's the thing. You're not just talking shit off to the side. You're actually doing it. You're putting your words into action, action into words, and there's a harmony to it, as you talk about the way that you carry your life, the way that your church carries itself. There's a harmony. I'm not saying one thing over here and doing another over here. You're doing it together, and I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for just, I don't know, being alive, being willing to change, being willing to step into a place where there's a lot of rejection and that grief and that loss and the things that you went through. Because I'll be honest, there are lives, and I can speak as one on the receiving end. There are lives that matter and will stay alive because of your compassion, because of your desire to go into their dark places, into the shadow places of where they've been really wounded and hurt. You will save lives. I mean, you are already. And I want to say that I've been one that's just been on the receiving end and changed by knowing you.
Well,
I'm so thankful.
I do not do compliments well. So
I know.
Say
that's
thank
why
you.
I said you have to be quiet. So
I know. Well, I'll say thank you. And I will say this too, because we're talking, right? So like you're saying these things to me and people are listening and they're thinking these things about me. But I will say that there's a whole bunch of people that are part of that. There's a group of people, and if they see this, and I'll actually share this with them, that allowed us to be able to do this. There are a handful of families that when we thought the doors were going to close, they stepped up and kept them open. And had it not been for their generosity, we wouldn't be able to do the work. We'd figure something else out. It'd look different, right? Like it would look different, but we wouldn't be able to do all the things that we do now. And so there's a lot of people that are behind the scenes. My wife is one of them who put up with all of the deconstruction, because she's just like, she's the person that doesn't need all the answers, to just be like, I'm just going to love people. I don't need all of this. I'm just going to love people. And I did. So she had to go along for the ride, so,
okay.
I mean, there are a lot of people like that, that make it possible, but thank you. And thank you on their behalf too.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Joe, I could talk to you forever. There's like so many things we could talk about, but I want to say thank you. Honestly, for just coming on here, being on here. I'll put like just certain books that you mentioned in the show notes. I'll also include just, like what do we do for Shift? Like if people want to find you, or what does it?
Oh yeah. If somebody's looking, it's just shiftgnv.com is the website. And it's a pretty basic website. We wanted it to be as transparent as possible.
Sure.
I mean, if you listen to me talk, I'm just an open book, and we wanted it to be that way. So, so we tell you who we are on the front page. You don't have to go. You scroll down a little bit, and we'll tell exactly who we are. Okay. But if somebody wants to like find me or whatever, I'm fairly active on social media, on TikTok, which is where we'll post a lot of stuff that, oh my gosh. People on social media, people need to calm down just a little bit. But I'm the real Joe Smith, one word, the real Joe Smith on TikTok. Mm-hmm. And then on Instagram, it's the same one, but I think it's, there's a dot in there. The real Joe Smith, Smith. Somebody else has it.
Okay.
So, but we post a lot of stuff on there. Shift is really active on social media, and you can kind of see who we are, where we are, that type of stuff. But, and I'll tell you this too. I think, this, I guess we're labeled progressive Christianity. So, we explore all kinds of stuff. If we're to believe that the words of Jesus are true, then all truth is God's truth, right? And we can find value anywhere it grows, right? So we have people all over the map, and you're not going to bother me. So like right now, right now we're ending, but I'm really diving into the Celtic traditions of Christianity.
Oh my goodness.
And
Yes, that's
and
sure.
yeah, oh my gosh. I'm getting ready to finish Sacred Earth, Sacred Soul by J. Philip Newell. Woo! And I'm just like, oh, the Western church just missed the boat on so much stuff. And there's so much wisdom and like how they took their pre-Christian traditions and just just welded things together, and how they had such a holistic and beautiful
I
view already
know.
of the world and
I
creation.
know.
And it just fits so perfectly with,
Oh,
it's beautiful. And
I
I wish I'd
know. That's
done it.
how I learned to love the earth. Really,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
how I learned to
So
connect
good.
even just with nature and God.
Yeah.
And
So
I mean,
good.
it was like, yeah, it was
Yeah.
not
So I've been,
something I grew up with. It just wasn't.
yeah, no, me neither. And that's what I've been doing lately. I have somebody I meet with, and they gave me a book of Celtic benedictions. And
Nice.
so every morning I go sit on my front porch with my cup of coffee, and this is not my personality, but I'm determined to do this. And I go out, and at sunrise, I read through these benedictions and prayers. And it's made a huge difference in my life and how I see people in the world, and the sacredness and all the things that we're a part of. And yeah, it's
Beautiful.
been good.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Joe,
Anyway,
thank you. Thank you so much
yeah,
for being here, really. And
yeah,
I
it
know
was
the
fun.
minute I get out of here, we're just going to lose each other here. But I just want to say again, thank you so much for
Yeah, thanks,
I'll put
Ellen.
all the stuff in the show notes,
Yeah,
and we'll be in touch for sure.
absolutely. Holler when you get here.
I will. All right.
Okay,
Take care,
cool.
Joe.